Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today, where we discuss the darker side of history. Because when history remains a mystery, we are bound to repeat it.
So today we're going to be talking about the curious case of Fatty Arbuckle.
Now, I've never heard this story before, don't know anything about Fatty Arbuckle, but she's convinced this case is going to piss me off.
It is. I needed a drink reading this case.
Oh.
It was tragic and absolutely horrible, and was dubbed one of the U.S.'s first trial by media cases. So it was highly publicized and just terrible.
All right, well, let's dive into it.
Yeah, so Fatty Arbuckle was born Roscoe Conkling Arbuckle, March 24th, 1887, to his parents Mary Gordon and William Goodrich Arbuckle, and was one of 9 children.
Holy shit.
Yeah, that's a lot
That's
of
a lot
kids.
of kids, yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of kids. And he was rumored to be illegitimate because of his excessive birth weight. He was born at about 13 pounds.
Oh,
Not 19, 13. Some places were saying 16, but 13 was the consensus there.
that's a big baby.
It's a big baby. It's a very big baby. And he was rumored to be illegitimate because of his parents' slight build. They were both really skinny. And from what I understood, I couldn't find his other siblings' exact birth weights because, they just don't list that. But apparently
They
it was...
weren't famous.
They weren't famous. No, apparently it was just a big enough jump to where everybody was like, you sure? Now, about a year after he was born, the family moved to California. And in his preteen years, he started starring or going out for $5 amateur comedy shows. And by the time he was 20 years old, he was a veteran of carnivals, vaudeville, and traveling stock shows.
So he was an entertainer at a young age.
He was an entertainer at a young age, and his act consisted of jokes, songs, magic tricks, and acrobats.
Wow.
He was always a big kid. That's why it was so awesome, because he was able to do these fantastic tricks and acrobatics, and he never used his weight to get cheap laughs.
Good
And
on
a
him.
lot of people really liked that because he didn't just sell out. Now, by 1913, I believe, he was hired by Mack Sennett's comedy club or comedy studio, and he started starring alongside the big names, Ford Sterling, Mabel Normand, and even Charlie Chaplin.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he ended up becoming alongside them as one of Keystone's top actors.
That's awesome.
Right? He was very, very good. And by 1914, he was actually writing all of the movies that he starred in. So he was quite the actor, and he was, quite the director, and he did very well for himself. Now, in 1917, he was hired by Joseph Shank's Comedy Film Corporation, I believe.
Something like that.
Something like that. And he wrote and directed every movie that he starred in, and even took over their creativity department.
Wow.
Yeah, he did very well for himself.
That is awesome.
Yeah, in fact, by 1920, he was writing and directing pretty much all of the movies that were coming out of there. And he also became one of, California's, Hollywood's first short movie actor to move over to feature films. So he did very well. Like, he was actually able to move from one aspect to another, and he just gained serious popularity because of his versatility. I mean, even from a young age, he was so
able
versatile.
To do so much.
He was, and then by the time he actually became a professional and was making all this money, he was doing well for himself, and he was making movies for everybody, his popularity just continued to grow. And I'm not quite sure the year, but he ended up working with Paramount Pictures and starred in about 18 feature films. And he, I believe, was one of the highest paid actors. At least I know it was, the amount that he made was completely unprecedented for the time. He was making about $3 million. And around the time that our actual story takes place, he had just signed another multi-million-dollar deal with Paramount Pictures to star in more films with them.
Wow.
He was very, very accomplished. And to celebrate his accomplishments, one of his friends, Fred Fishbach, went out and organized this giant party to take place over the Labor Day weekend to celebrate all of his accomplishments. Now, before the party took place, Fatty Arbuckle went to go and get his Arrows Pierce vehicle worked on. He took it to the shop, and he was there checking on how everything was going, and he ended up sitting down on a rag that was soaked in acid and suffered second-degree burns on his butt.
His gluteus maximus.
His gluteus maximus. I don't know what the PC term for that is. His butt. He burned his butt. He did. And he tried to get his friend Fred to stop this party. He's like, I can't go. I have burns on my booty. And his Fred was having absolutely none of that. Mr. Fishbot was like, no, you're going. And he actually went out and found one of those rubber padded rings for him to sit on.
A donut.
A donut, yeah. He found him a donut, and he got them adjoining rooms at the hotel they were going to be staying.
The show must go on.
The show must go on. So, Labor Day weekend comes up in 1921, and they set off to go to their party at the St. Francis Hotel. And he had got them the adjoining rooms because of his burned booty. And the party started. Now this was during Prohibition, so alcohol was a no-no. But according to Mr. Arbuckle here, according to Mr. Arbuckle, he organized everything, including booze, guests, the venue, everything. So this party, he pretty much just showed up to it, and the booze was already there, and everything was taken care of for him. Now, it's reported that when he woke up the following morning after he got to this party, he woke up to a ton of uninvited guests, like people he did not know and were not supposed to be there. And he found all this out while walking around in his PJs, his robe, and his slippers.
Not a good look for...
Not a good look. It wasn't a good look.
As famous as he was, these random people, yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, he was kind of like, and he just went on with his party. And that's when he noticed two individuals there that definitely were not invited. And those women were Maud Delmont and Virginia Rapp. And the reason why they were not invited was because of their reputations. And they weren't the best reputations. And we'll get into that in a second.
Were they ladies of the evening?
No. It's slightly worse. But he didn't want them there because of the reputation that they held. He was afraid the police were going to get called and their gin party was going to be discovered.
Oh.
Right? So Maud, he didn't want her there because she had a reputation of being a madam and a blackmailer.
Oh.
So not a very good person. And Virginia Rapp, she wasn't quite as bad. She was an aspiring actress. She was a model. She just had a history of drinking, allegedly. According to what came out of the trial, she would go to parties and she would drink a lot. So, a day or two into the party, Virginia Rapp is discovered in Mr. Arbuckle's room, completely knocked out. And
like blacked out drunk?
Yeah, she was just kind of knocked out drunk, laid out on the bed, and it was reported by, at the time, an unknown eyewitness that she was laying on the bed, moaning, and was able to say, Arbuckle did it. She was taken into an adjoining room where a doctor was called, and a couple days later, she was taken to the hospital where she died on September 9th, I believe. Now, this eyewitness came forward and said that she saw Mr. Arbuckle and Virginia Rapp drinking together, and they ended up leaving, going into the room alone, and about 30 minutes later, she claims she heard Virginia freaking out, screaming, like something terrible is going on in that room. So she knocks on the door and even kicks at the door to try to get into the room. Door doesn't open. An extended period of time later, so I don't know how much longer she meant by that, he comes to the door, Mr. Arbuckle, and he's kind of in his PJs and he's wearing Virginia's hat, allegedly. Kind of cockeyed to the side, smiling, and then there's Virginia on the bed. saying Arbuckle did it. Now, all these rumors start to spread, and it hits the media. And the media is reporting that this lady was found in Arbuckle's room, this is what she said, and this is what they found, and now she's dead. This eyewitness also came forward to say that, it appeared, from what she heard, that Virginia might have been raped. So with all of this allegations going around of rape, and now this young lady is dead, Fatty Arbuckle, I believe he turns himself in, but he is eventually arrested and held without bail for 3 weeks on charges of rape and manslaughter of Virginia Rapp. And this is where it gets kind of horrible, and it's going to piss you off. None of that happened.
He didn't go to jail?
No. He went to jail. He was held, and he had a trial set for November of 1921, I believe. Might have been 22, but no, I think it was 1921. Yeah. He was taken to trial. Everything that this eyewitness said was a lie.
She wasn't found in his bed?
She was found in his room.
But he wasn't in there.
No, he was in there, but he wasn't alone with her. Right? So let me explain, because it's kind of... So, Maud Delmont, the known madam and blackmailer, had a history...
Of setting people up?
Of setting rich men up, wealthy men up, actually. She would procure young women, take them to parties with wealthy men, and then those men would somehow be getting blackmailed for the exact same thing, minus the death part. So she could make money. And that's part of the reason why he didn't want her there in the first place. I believe that's why. But
she already had a history of doing these kinds of things.
She had a history of that happening. Now, during her actual statements with police and prosecution, her story changed so many times that they knew they were not going to put her on the stand in the first place. She went from saying she was lifelong friends with Virginia to only having met her a couple days before the party. Everything that she was saying was going back and forth. Nothing she said was consistent, so they knew that they were not going to put her on the stand.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Mr. Arbuckle still does not know who this mystery eyewitness is. And his legal team is out there begging and pleading with the media, like, hey, please give us a chance. Let us go to trial. Wait till you have all the information before you form an opinion, because what is being said is not accurate, and we have proof that it's not accurate. You just have got to let us go to trial. So his legal team is pleading for him. Mr. Arbuckle's being held without bail for 3 weeks. He can't do anything about this. Meanwhile,
doesn't seem very fair.
It's not fair. And then you've got this eyewitness that's so shaky that the prosecution team knows they're not going to put her on the stand, but they're going forward with the trial anyway. Right? So, yeah. So his trial took place, I believe it's San Francisco's district attorney's office is who actually ended up trying him. And it's said that Matthew Brady, the district attorney who was trying him, might have been just trying to bolster his career, because he's a big name. This is a big case. It is a career-making case. If this is true and something comes of this, it would skyrocket his career.
Right.
So it's believed that might be why he went forward, knowing that she was as shaky and unreliable as she was, and making the very conscious decision to not put her on the stand even after pretty much everything has already been put into play here. So, yeah. His trial comes along, and his defense team really wants to introduce information about Virginia that's kind of defamatory to her reputation, and Mr. Arbuckle did not want to release that information. He did not want to tarnish her reputation after she had died.
Right.
He refused to. And because of that, his trial ended in a hung jury, 10-2 to acquit. So nobody could imagine that he did this. Nobody. But there was still enough doubt that they were hung up about it. Now, second trial comes around, same thing. In the third trial, because he got tried 3 times. In the third trial, he finally lets his legal team go forward with their plan because he's depleted all his funds. It said he spent, I think, about $700,000 on defense. And you've got to think, this is back in the 1920s. It's that kind of money is ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know?
That's millions today.
Millions of dollars. His career was over. Like, he was, I mean, you got to think, you don't come back from something like that. You just don't. So there was no guaranteed funds after that. So he pretty much was just at that point where he's like, I can't, as much as I don't want to do this, I have to. And he knew that he, you know, needed to tell his story. He had told in the previous 2 trials, but it was just so crazy how many trials he had to go through that I wanted to save this for the last one. But all of this was said, and I'm going to add in what the defense attorney said. So, his story was, he was drinking with Virginia when she became a little drunk and intoxicated and started, you know, kind of complaining allegedly that she was really hot and started taking off all her clothes. And she leaves. Arbuckle and a couple other people, so multiple different eyewitnesses, end up finding her in his bedroom, throwing up and just getting sick in his bathroom. So they carry her and they place her on his bed. A doctor is notified where she's moved to another room. The doctor attends to her, and the doctor testifies at court. There was no signs of violence and no signs of rape. The medical examiner even came out and said, yeah, there was nothing. But the prosecution dismissed all, like, at least the rape portion as hearsay, because you can't prove she was raped by a medical exam, which is crap. But
even back in those days,
that's crap. It's crap. You can tell. Rape is violent.
Yeah.
You know, you can tell. you can tell. And he goes on and he explains his side of the story. He lets all that out. The defense team then brings forward witnesses who say she's done this before. She's had chronic bladder issues because the medical examiner said she died from her bladder rupturing. That's why she died. She wasn't beaten. She wasn't raped. Her rupture of her bladder.
Right.
Her friends came out and said, yeah, she's had chronic bladder problems. People who knew her. They also came out and said, yeah, when she goes to parties, she excessively drinks. And it took the jury about 5 minutes to come back and completely acquit him after this third trial. After he finally allowed them to introduce character witnesses to Virginia saying, yeah, she's kind of what was known as a boozer, or still kind of is a boozer, and somebody who liked to take off their clothes and had a chronic bladder condition.
After he threw away his whole life, his whole career, spent all of his money just trying to remain a free man because somebody decided that they were going to lie.
Yeah, she lied. And she destroyed this man's career, like quite literally destroyed his career. After the trial ended and he was acquitted, he changed his name to William or Will Good. So, his father's name was William B. Goodrich.
Yeah.
He changed his name to Will Good. And he worked behind the scenes as a director for his few remaining loyal friends. And eventually he died, I believe, in 1942 from a heart attack at only, I think, 46 years old.
Wow.
So he went from being super popular at the height of his career to one person completely changing his life, and then the media going out there and just rolling with it.
Dragging him through the mud.
Dragging him through the mud. Because not all the evidence was released. Like, they didn't have the coroner's report when they said all that they said. They didn't have multiple eyewitness testimonies. They only had one. So they kind of just took what she said.
And a flaky one at best.
Well, she wasn't flaky for the media. She was flaky for the police. So
right.
they give them that. They didn't know that. But at the same time, taking one person's, testimony, and we know how eyewitnesses are. They're never accurate. I mean, you might get one person out of 100 who gets most of the information right.
Right.
But, so they took this one person and they took it as, this is what happened, set in stone, and ran with it. And it destroyed his career before he ever had his day in court. And by the time he was able to prove his innocence, like, she died of an accident. Nothing that was said actually happened.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
It's dangerous, and his career was over. He was blacklisted by Paramount Pictures. I mean, they took him off the air. He was banned from appearing on television. And they didn't reverse that decision for about 8 months.
After he was acquitted?
After he was acquitted, yeah. For about 8 months, it took them to finally allow him, unban him from being on TV. But the damage was done.
Yeah.
You couldn't do anything at that point.
You can't take that back.
You can't put toothpaste back in a tube. You can't. That's why it's so dangerous to just roll with it and be like, just take what somebody says as fact and just go. Like,
right. With no investigation done.
No investigation done. I mean, they didn't even, like, the media didn't even give the police the chance to actually figure out what happened. So I think another reason why the prosecution just didn't let up on this case is because pretty much everybody was calling for blood at this point. Everybody was furious. How could our beloved actor do this?
Yeah.
And
how could he do such a thing?
How could he do such a thing? And at that point,
he didn't.
He didn't. And his name was dragged through the mud, and that's not fair, because that's how he's remembered by a lot of people. Fatty Arbuckle, tried for rape and murder. Well, manslaughter, but still.
Yeah, that's...
It's horrible, and he didn't deserve that.
That's a pretty infuriating story.
It's very infuriating. Especially since she was a known madam and blackmailer.
Yeah.
The police should have known better than to trust anything that she said in the first place. And for her to come in and be the hero, like, I knocked on the door and kicked at it while it was locked to get to her. Bull crap. Bull crap. She's a known bad person. She had a criminal history of, I think, fraud and extortion. So, I mean, why in
She'd do anything to get money.
Exactly. So why in the world they would ever listen to this woman in the first place, I don't know. But, I mean, they did, and this is the result of it. I mean, one of silent movies' greatest actors completely defamed and will forever be tarnished. There's no escaping it.
No.
And it's wrong.
All because of this one woman's...
All because of this one woman's lie. And it's wrong and it's horrible.
It is. Well. Anyway, guys, if you enjoyed this story and want to hear more like it, please like, share, subscribe. And if you have any recommendations for us, leave them in the comments. Thank you so much, and y'all have a great rest of your day.
Bye.